And we're live. Welcome everyone to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, February 2nd, 2022. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in the RFC's issue 520 on npm/RFC's repo on github.com. I'll paste the link to that ticket. If you haven't already, feel free to add yourself to the meeting notes doc, which I've spammed here in chat for folks. Just quick reminder, these calls and all comms on the RFC's repo are covered under a code of conduct, which we ask you to please abide by. In these calls, we ask to please be mindful as other folks are talking and wait your turn. Please raise your hand if someone is talking and we'll call upon you. And yeah, ideally just be kind to each other. And quickly want to give some space for any announcements folks might have. The one thing that's been on our radar for the last little while is just the OpenJS World conference that's coming up. Hopefully, it sounds like there's going to be a collab summit also at this time, which our team has participated in historically, which we'd love to see folks there, ideally in person, fingers crossed, but also virtually if that can also be possible. So it's definitely an event that I'm looking forward to personally, and hopefully we can see a lot of folks there. They do have a CFP that is still open, so if you would like to submit a talk, I think you have about a week or so left to submit. Please do so. It's the first conference I'll be going to in about 2 years, so exciting. Any other announcements before we move on to the agenda? If not, let's dive in. So the first RC that we have, PR that is open for 335. This is make npm install log level warn output quieter. I'm just gonna reference this. Oh, and looks like, is that link working for other folks?
I'm getting a lot of GitHub 500 errors right now, so
yep,
it might just be a poorly timed incident.
Oh, okay. Well, this might be a short RFC call today if we're not able to check out RCs. I know at least we've got one that we have checked out in a branch that we can talk to, which is the distributions one. Let's see quickly.
It seems that it is like I opened up gist and it's down, so I assume it is. If you want to pull up one that's checked out, I would recommend that, and if it's resolved at the end, that's.
I'm getting about one successful refresh after out of about 50, so it's not
okay. Good. Okay, I appreciate it.
But if you want, we can start with mine. The next point there is deprecated package. That one I also have checked locally. I could share my screen.
Sorry, say that again, Roy. I did catch the last little bit.
I can share my screen if you want for that one.
Sure, let's do that.
So I don't know, you may not have seen them then, but I made some comments on the distributions RFC before everything died. So we can certainly have a chat about that if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we're missing some examples that I think that was the first thing I saw in terms of your suggestion, was missing some examples of the other types of conditions that you can use for the distributions.
What was that? And in your example, all of the default consumers of my packages omit tests, but I want to be able to have folks like myself opt into including them. And if I'm forced to do that by publishing a separate package, that's actually fine. I could make some throwaway package scope for that and publish everything under it, right? Like, I'm very happy with that. The concern, but like with it seems like the motivation is to replace optional dependencies essentially, which is fine, but optional dependencies are I want to add a thing to my package. It's not, I want to replace myself with a thing.
Yeah, so it's not supposed to replace optional dependencies. So maybe we can circle back to this because there's a few other things that I want to talk to, and maybe in the time that we look over Roy's, we can actually look at that RFC together. So, Roy, did you want to jump into your UX improvements to deprecation warnings?
Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe just starting with, now that you're talking about so much about the distributions, maybe we should just dive into that one to start with.
Okay. I mean, the one thing that I'll note about the I think you were speaking to then, Jordan, about your specific use case and what you were looking for from package distributions. I don't think we would support that condition from the outset, but that's not saying that we couldn't add in the future like a condition that you could use to then do that. So right now we want to limit the scope to just information that we currently use, specifically for engine strict or like other information that we're aware of, like OS. What you're asking for is like, then there's some sort of condition that would check for maybe test, like
or npm config or something. Yeah,
exactly, something else, which again we could add, I think, later. It's not saying that we're limited in what we want to initially offer, but I think that if we start out here, it's like a good like phased approach to just having like information we're already aware of. We already document OS and CPU right now, and engines, and we're already aware of those, and they can be used to then make that determination for the package distributions in what we see the highest use cases being is
but that
OS.
That's sort of why I jumped to optional dependencies, because it seems there is one or two package clusters I know of that are doing this brand new, very rare, very niche use case of I want to make a sort of proxy dispatching package and use me as a way to like bootstrap the actual package you want for your platform. That's a pretty rare use case because most things published are Node JavaScript programs and don't require that. So the more common use case, I think, is actually optional dependencies, which is underutilized because you can't specify that I have these 7 optional dependencies, but really it's just one depending on which platform you have or which OS or which engines. And so to me, with optional dependencies, you're just saying this dependency at this version, and you have to rely on it compiling and failing to compile in order to not be installed where it's not needed. And you can't actually avoid trying to install it where it's not needed. Whereas this sort of distributions format that I saw suggested to me a better schema for optional dependencies, where you can say this dependency should only be attempted under these conditions. Yeah. And under these conditions, perhaps you want it to be required and not optional.
Oh, I see where you're going with this, because you're saying it's more broader than that. You would like to see this conditions applied more broadly than just even the singular, like you're saying.
Well, I'm saying that the ability to replace the package itself, that for one package to say, replace me with something else, that's a brand new thing that is very much not a common use case. And I don't even know if it's a good one. It's just one that one or two very specific examples have recently. The thing that is a very broad use case and is a good one is I have one conceptual dependency that needs one of a set of packages depending on those conditions. Meaning, like, I need Puppeteer, or like I need a file watcher, and my file watcher is this package on a Mac and this package on Linux and this package on Windows. But I need only one file watcher. But I shouldn't be. It's not successful if I don't have one file watcher, right? Like, that's a common use case. The sort of, I think it's ES build is one of them. That's sort of like, I am a thing that is solely compiled, and I actually need to be replaced with something. Like, I don't think that's a common use case, and I'm skeptical that it's one we should optimize for.
So the reason why this is getting attention and was getting attention 6 months ago and getting attention, like we consider this even like a year ago, and this has constantly come up, is for shipping binaries that are specific to the platform. And that is today, what happens is we're trying to eliminate and I can't pull this up right now, but the language that I was trying to use in the RFC specifically is implying that we're trying to get this to this place where there's enough features available to people to limit their usage of install scripts, to do any kind of builds, to introduce any kind of like build step post installation, right? Like, or like, you know,
and I can see how the distributions, as you seem to have phrased it, how that sort of solves the problem when the variants are all made by the same author. Yes. Meaning if the use case is a bunch of people want to depend on ES Build, and all of the different variants of ES Build are published by the ES Build project, and like that, this sort of would allow that to be abstracted away so that the consumers of ES Build don't have to know or care about those details, and ES Build can actually just sit right. So I get that, but like the file watcher use case, those might be completely distinct packages. Chakadar doesn't make a Windows version, right? And so Chakadar won't declare, if you're on Windows, use this other thing. They might, but like you shouldn't be expected to, because they don't make it and they can't, you know, and maybe there's, and for similar examples, maybe there's like multiple competing solutions, and it doesn't really make sense to solve that problem by having a singular package be the source of truth for the platform to package map. Right.
Yeah.
And so the use case where one package author is actually compiling all of the versions for all the platforms, I think that is very rare and uncommon.
So I'll quickly respond to that, and then Owen, I see your hands up. I don't think we're trying to work around not updating the log file or having that change in different environments. But there seems to be like, we can't really solve all the problems. If you want to essentially swap out one package for another, there's a real concern there that the APIs are completely different. And so like they are not potentially interchangeable. So that's why this is so maybe scoped or specific to I potentially own all these packages that are distributions that are pre-built with the proper binaries that they need, that are, you know, just essentially the exact same package, but built for and having explicit constraints about the environment that I'm going to be installed into and used like under. There might be here, like what you're speaking to, there might be a separate feature that we can add that is going to address the other types of concerns that you have, or like the other wants that you have, right? It sounds like it's not a concern. It's just like, hey, can we apply this kind of idea to your want, right?
I think it's that the problem, and sorry, Owen, I keep replying, that it's that the issue is actually, the problem is the same, but the broader conceptual problem, which is I want to use something and that's platform dependent. But you're right that it's not, that doesn't necessarily mean, like, there are some use cases where the alternatives are drop-in replacements, and there are some use cases where they are not. But neither of those should be, I think, inherently privileged one over the other. And I don't think it's actually right to try and solve one of them without trying to solve the other. I think that that it would be it would be inappropriate to say people should use aliases to handle this, just like it would be inappropriate to say people should use distributions to handle this, because both of those are heavily exclusionary to like the rest of that big actual conceptual problem set. So like it's important to consider that this is a distinct pile of use cases, like the ES Build thing versus like the file watcher thing. But like it seems worth trying to tackle it holistically instead of piecemeal. I know, I'll be quiet for a while now.
Oh, and feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, more to like the ES Build, or seeing a lot of similar cases, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with StackBlitz, but you know, that's a great case where they don't allow post-install scripts, so you can't build for, you know, the particular operating system. So, and I think it's maybe come up before. I'm not sure if it's tied to this because I can't see the issue, but that's potentially a more emerging use case for I own the package and I'm going to pre-build the binaries, and then, something like StackBlitz can pick like, oh, I'm running on this, figure out through the matrix the right one. But I think to Jordan's point, it would be interesting to see, how many people or how many authors are providing variants that they themselves, aren't, providing first party support for, right? Like, well, I did all the work for Mac and Linux, but you're on your own for Windows, as opposed to say like ES Build, which is like, I got you covered top to bottom here, the API is built into NPM, like a node matrix, here's a platform matrix. And, if I miss one, that's still on me, but, if I don't, then you're great. And maybe this is something that the emergence of StackBlitz can help with, is thus moving away further from post-install scripts. So anyway, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with StackBlitz, but it's getting a lot of traction, especially with web containers. And maybe it's a way to encourage more developers, and maybe that's something NPM or GitHub can do to be like, here's tools and resources for you to own that distribution end to end. Here's a template of how you could pre-build like ES Build does, leverage their experience so far, some of these kind of more rusty or other type of tool chains. And, maybe that goes into like the package maintenance working group, something like that, so, but yeah, maybe again, to Jordan's point, I'm not sure how you gather that data, but, surveying that might help you understand if there is any niche, or if it's split down the middle, or, anyway, just throwing that out there, but I think very useful in terms of conceptualization.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to comment one thing, and then Roy, I see your hands up. Yeah, so I think that this initial set of conditions is because we're so focused on like the platform information is not limiting to the eventual, could we potentially introduce other types of conditions, other information that we can utilize to expand the scope of the use cases that we support. So this is sort of a cursory like understanding of where we think the need is the most, and like this is definitely directed at a subset of package maintainers. This is a small group that have this problem, which they are solving through, I would say, what we consider to be like optimal, ways, like bespoke ways that we're trying to patch, essentially, by considering completely turning off people's ability to run install scripts, right? Like, so that's like one of the things that, like, if we don't do this, can we address this other thing? And so providing some kind of mechanism for people to, do this specific thing, which is to ship a version of themselves that is specifically pre-built, that addresses, the conditions, hopefully incentivizes the right kind of, not the right, but like the more optimal sort of experience for everyone. And we can gradually move away from the need for, let's say, install scripts. But yeah, go ahead, Roy, and then Jordan.
Sure. Yeah, I was basically going to say that, but I also had a second part that, oops. Oh my God. Can you hear me?
Yep. Still.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, basically I was going to also mention that our idea here, Jordan, or at least what I discussed previously with Darcy when we were reviewing this RFC, is also to go in parts. I know we did that in the past with the workspaces, like we split that in many parts, like there was at least 4 different RFCs I worked on that were just continuation of the work on workspaces. So the idea here would be similar, so that this could provide the initial support for distributions or a way. And now we're focusing on this binary use case distribution. But then in the future, that won't stop us for adding different ways to maybe filter optional dependencies at the moment of install and have that also be consumed alongside of the distributions, right? So you can see how we can incrementally build from this. So this would be the foundational step to start the work on supporting different variants distributions.
So my sort of response to both of those is, I think you can already do this with optional dependencies. ESBuild could have an optional dependency on all their things and have a tiny file to compile that does nothing except fails if it's on the wrong arch. And they could have everything else be precompiled. It's awkward, it's not ergonomic, and it still requires all the variants to be installed, but it would actually, that would work just fine with no changes, no post-install scripts, just the build scripts, which are already a thing. And improving the ergonomics of that by adding conditions to optional dependencies in some way would solve every problem all at once. And so, in other words, the leap doesn't have to be from post-install scripts to distributions. It could be from post-install scripts to optional dependencies to let's make all optional dependency use cases better all at once with one feature. And then you've still achieved the goal of addressing post-install scripts. You've also dramatically decreased the install size and complexity and bandwidth of anything that has these dependencies in its graph, not just ESBuild and those few use cases, but everything, right? Like there's just like, and I'm not saying that's the best way to do it or the only way to do it. It's just like, that to me seems like a better plan. And it took me about 3 minutes of thinking to come up with it. And like, maybe it's a terrible idea for reasons, but like, I think that that a more holistic look is probably a better approach than trying to jump straight to a solution. You know, like it seems like an XY problem to me, right? Like if the problem that we think we have is we're using install scripts for this one use case, like, well, obviously let's just make a new feature to solve that one use case. But like, I think that there's a better process to be applied that can achieve the same goals, because I think those goals are important.
Yeah, definitely. I think we did see at one point, and I'm just trying to find it, somebody referenced this type of, here, I think I found it. It was in a discussion where which I think we had previously brought up here, discussion 440 in the RFC's repo, peer dependency groups, where they were essentially considering like peer dependency groups and alternatives to those. It's a little bit similar to, I think, what you're saying, Jordan, in terms of like optional dependencies on steroids with like new feature set of conditions. And I think I might have even seen another reference of folks asking for something similar to what you were saying.
Right. Because I mean, the other advantage there, right, is that the optional dependencies have sort of been like the fact that they're optional is not really the important bit there. It's just the way that the feature has been achieved. Like the important bit is like, I have a thing that may or may not exist, and when it exists, it may be one of a number of possibilities, right? And whether those have different names or the same name is kind of irrelevant. Like either way, you have to write code that handles that, you know? Like
yeah, I guess that's what's getting, yeah, I guess that's what this is getting around when saying that we want to essentially swap or alias the like link, right. the getting around the which version was installed problem is really what we're trying to achieve here. Like that.
The other go ahead, sorry.
Well, that essentially like that bootloader script that ESBuild has, or other people are trying to re-implement, you know, time and time again to see which optional dependency was installed, and then essentially and then pass that through. Like that to me is kind of the unergonomic, like making it hard for the ecosystem to like do that, right? Not saying that again, like it seems like there's two use cases that maybe we can use some of the similar idea to approach these things, right? So you want this feature in optional dependencies itself, so you can write conditions for your optional.
Well, it doesn't have to be in
dependencies.
there. It's just conceptually what I want is to, like it's the aliasing that makes me really concerned. Like, I also am wondering if this is a security concern, because like somebody could make a package that only on a target platform swaps out the package for a malicious one. Like, it's like a new attack vector. Right?
Yeah, like aliasing in general is like that, right? So like
right.
That's one thing where.
But like aliasing is in the existing dependencies lists. So like a tool is either going to break on it or understand it.
Yeah, we're still going to audit essentially these packages, right? Like, so it's
Right.
not like you're going to get around an audit.
That's fair.
So if we've defined that, and what's even maybe a little bit more interesting is that we're trying to address the problem of a lot of folks are over the wire trying to download binaries without shipping them as packages. This would like really solidify, I think, the idea that we want you to ship a package for that specific distribution with that like pre-built binary in it, and then like essentially use the name to reference that thing. Like this is, we want this to become the canonical way that you ship, different binaries like in npm, and otherwise like you have to like turn on install scripts.
There's a built-in presumption in that, which is that behavior is something that's actually, we want to encourage that people to ship lots of compiled things. And if we want, wanting to enable it is a very different statement than wanting to encourage it.
I think in our ecosystem, there's a core tenet, which is we have immutability in the registry and we abide by Semper. And so like those two things like together are the sort of core tenets that I look to when I'm thinking what's happening right now that is concerning to me from a security practice or whatever, that is risky for our community. And one of them is referencing any kind of mutable third-party resource to download some other kind of piece of software over the wire, etc. That to me is like, we want to prevent that. And so how do we provide a new means of you like doing that in a better way, or more like, again, like, yeah, that's the hope with this, like, I think. But I would like to address like not concerns, but like the use cases that you're bringing up. It may just be a separate RFC, or maybe we can like split this out in some way that it matches.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any pushback for me or anyone else on the goal of like, let's find a way to remove the need for install scripts. Like, everyone wants that. So I hope that we spend more time thinking about everything holistically instead of kind of tunnel visioning on individual iterative solutions. But yeah, that's all.
Yeah, like the thing is, like, I don't think we can turn them off until we have other avenues for all the use cases people have today for using them. And so like that's kind of the chicken and the egg. It's like what's going to come first here. And I'm hoping that with this, if we land something like this, it's enough so an incentive that we can go out to those folks and say, hey, can you start to build this? And then I really think it's a huge win if we get people distributing all their software on the registry, right? Like if there's no references to Git repos, there's no, like moving off of that, and so that is, to me, is a huge win. I'm very concerned, obviously, about, any kind of reference to a dependency that is not on the registry. That is my biggest concern personally. That is not a package. Like if it was up to me, I would consider that like a flaggable offense. If you've got a reference to a GitHub repo in your package today, like we should like you consider even choosing not to install those, as a security issue. So anyways, that's I think a really good synopsis of what we're aiming at with distributions. It just got open today, so I know a lot of folks might not have had a chance to read the document yet. It sounds like I have to go back and edit some of the examples. So I apologize there, Jordan. There's some missing references that I'm sure would make things a lot more clear as well. But really excited for folks to give their feedback, and we can keep it open for a couple of weeks here and have discussions. So great. GitHub is back up. Maybe we can jump back to the beginning of our agenda here. And this is pull request 4335. So npm install log level warn output quieter. I'm not sure, is Dabrian or Dave on the call? Nope. Oh. Did anybody get a chance to look at this before today?
I did.
Do you have a quick synopsis of this?
Yeah, so basically the idea here is they want to have like no output at the end of an install, right? So I mentioned in the pull request there, like if it's the audit and the funding message that bothers them, like they can suppress that by adding options to no audit, no fund, right? But there is also the message about like how long it took the npm install command to run. So yeah, like they were saying like to get rid of everything, all the output. Yeah. So
Is silent not do that?
Yeah, but I think it's just for warning, if I'm not mistaken, because they would only they would not want to silence everything. They would still want to be aware if there was a warning or an error, right? So basically, this might also play with some of the things Luke was working on in trying to clean up the standard error and standard output story on the client. I know Luke has been poking to that. So yeah, I just wanted to bring the discussion, like see if it is something we would actually want to explore, like, or yeah.
I'm not sure, Luke, if you have any thoughts on this, because I know you've been digging here as
yeah, it is related to an RFC or an RRFC that I commented on that is on the agenda for later. As for this specific one, I'm not sure I have enough context right now. I do remember looking at it originally, but then have not taken a second look. But it does feel to me like this, if it's an issue, I don't think this is the right change to make. I think the issue is making the output better, and silent as like a way to turn off all output is the right lever to pull for like not wanting to see it, but just we shouldn't have too verbose of output, and then possibly changing stuff from warnings to different levels. So I feel like it's more like a case-by-case basis of specific output and making it better so people want to see it, and then changing levels for specific messages so that, but I don't think this is the right change to make for this specific problem.
It definitely seems like we don't have like we sort of have these groups with cascade, and there's no way to like have explicit omissions or inclusions. So it's like warning or log level warn will include info because like that's the lowest level or the highest level or however we want to look at that in inverse sort of thing. Is that accurate? Kind of like what I'm saying, like it seems like if we're going to show warnings, we also show notices and info, right? Like that's how that works, right?
Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure what the levels are currently. They're also in flux a little bit. And I know of at least one bug where setting flags, not the log level flag, will change your log level, like timing, but that like bumps it to a different level, which will then include HTTP messages. So I do think there's probably some auditing to do there and seeing if we still agree with like what levels are what and how they cascade onto each other. But I believe warning is second below error. So if that's true, then
Should be,
yeah, then this could just be a bug too, because they said I just reread the first paragraph where they said they did try log level error and that wasn't good enough to hide this stuff. And I think that's because some of these messages just are standard, get printed to standard out, not as a log message, which is another thing I wanted to address in my other RFC kind of.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just also made the quip that it doesn't help that we alias all the log levels to like D, 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 D. So it seems like it's like, you know, you're expanding the scope versus having a more granular flags for like include, exclude, kind of like what I was saying before, like to be able to include this type of warning, exclude this type of warning, the more confined, like granular control over logs. So yeah, you might be right. It's just potentially just a bug that we can fix, or it might be like some actual refactoring work we could have to do to like get this. Okay. Did you want to go, Roy? Speak a little bit to the deprecation UX.
Sure. Yeah. So let me just basically introduce it again. We did this last week, but I know Jordan's here today. We had some other folks that were not. So basically, it is about cleaning up the output during npm install. It is basically the natural evolution. We've been cleaning the output since v7. We took away all the lifecycle scripts output from the install, and basically we were trying to converge into the notification, this kind of notification system we have at the end. So we let you know about how much vulnerabilities there might be in your install tree. We let you know about the packages that are looking for funding. So we might as well just let you know, oh, there are some deprecation and the current install tree. So please take a look at it. So this RFC is basically proposing that new UX. So one takeaway from the last meeting that we want to do here is to clean up and make sure this session, there's a session here about improving the current, some other existing methods like LS and they're, I think, outdated. Basically, let's take that part away from this RFC. Let's focus only on the npm install side of the story here. So it will be just stop logging directly to standard output during the install with all these warning messages, and present a notification system at the end, letting you know there are this many packets that are deprecated and needs your attention. And then we need to provide a top level command or some other type of command to basically print the list of deprecated packages. It can be something similar to what we print today during the install. So that's basically where we are with this proposal right now. And yeah, open for feedback if anybody has comments.
I mean, I'm a +1 on the, consolidating the output. A lot of folks consider it scary. I think that's what we referenced last week. A lot of newcomers the first time running install, seeing deprecated errors can be scary, especially if they can't do anything about them. So at least even consolidating them into a single line just for awareness. I think a key with like how we've consolidated the logs or sorry, that output today in V7 for a lot of those other kind of audit output, etc. Like packages changed, is for awareness. And then like having a separate a top level command, I think makes sense. We talked about that last week in terms of we have a top level command for deprecate. So it seems kind of like, okay, why not have a top level command to show like the list of deprecated packages that are found. Ideally, it would be great if we had a consolidated view of all those, all of this kind of metadata and information about your packages in a single consolidated view. But there was no like immediate place that I think made sense, because we sort of take that approach to filtering right now with outdated and with, like LS is specifically extraneous or deduped. So like, those are sort of the states in which we've bucketed these commands. So I think this approach makes sense. I'm not sure who was first, Jordan or Reese.
Go ahead, Reese, if you want.
Yeah, thanks. This is partly like related to Jordan's comments on this one as well. Like I have a little bit of hesitation on the idea of having it automatically at the end of install. It could be nice to make this an opt-in command initially, if that's not too much hassle. Things which can be good for like 90% of people can still have massive unintended consequences. You've probably seen with like npm audit. Actually, it's not even audit. I mean, when you run install and it says, you've got the vulnerable packages, it can sometimes lead to like kind of like an online almost like harassment of people in the open source ecosystem, which I think is what Jordan's worried about. So I don't know if you remember there's a blog post fairly recently, like half year at least, by was it Dan from React, kind of like saying this all sucks. And it's basically because like people run npm install, they get told they got vulnerabilities, they figure out where they came from, and then they go and harass the package that they came from. He's like, none of these are relevant, kind of thing. So if you then end up with the same crowd behavior due to like deprecated packages, whereas like Jordan says, like this is, that's my responsibility. It's just like a potential unintended consequence where you end up with the crowds with pitchforks again, chasing open source maintainers to like replace that deprecated package and things like that.
Yeah. So, okay. So I have some responses and a concrete proposal. So the responses, I probably already stated some of these things, but I'm going to restate them. Somebody should simply never see deprecation warnings for transitive dependencies. It's none of their business. A security warning, it's their business in some way, right? Like you want to know if a transitive dependency has a security issue that could affect you. If knowing that someone 10 levels deep typed npm deprecate, regardless of what they type in that message, doesn't matter. It's none of your business. That is the business of the person who depended on that package, the package you depended on it. So, like if somebody wants that information, okay, great. It's fine if they can find it, but it shouldn't ever be shown by default because it's never actionable and it's just not relevant. It's not useful. Requests maintainer and chose to deprecate it, for example, that's fine. They're entitled to do that. But something that is indirectly depending on request, who cares? If the thing they depend on cares, that thing will depend on something else. And if it doesn't, who cares, right? Like it still works. When you trust a package, you are trusting that package to delegate responsibility to its own dependencies. And it should be none of your business which ones those are, except, modulo security issues. Okay, so my concrete proposal. Take every deprecation message that would normally print during an install. Collapse them all to a single line that says X runtime dependencies and Y dev dependencies have deprecation warnings. Run this command to see them. That's it. One line, max. And you don't see that line if there's zero direct deprecation warnings. That command could be, for example, npm deprecations. You run it with a package specifier argument, and it does what my deprecations package does, and it lists the deprecations messages by version on that package. If you run it without a package specifier, it just runs on your tree. And you can, just like every other npm command, you could do --dev or --prod and filter down. But it just, but by default, it would have a depth of 0. And not the depth command, because that is problematic for reasons, but by default, it would only show directs. And then you can add an additional option if you want to be shown the full tree and see all the transitive deprecation warnings. But that, yeah, just, yeah, like, it was, does npm-ls, I think npm-ls shows the whole tree by default, but it doesn't anymore?
Nope.
Okay, well then great, just like that. Even better, precedent. And then the result would then be if there are deprecation warnings that are actionable, somebody sees a notice, hey, check this out. Just like they see a one-line message about run npm fund or run npm audit. Great. That separate command lets them be as verbose or filtered as they want. And the default behavior of that command is also the actionable thing, which is show me deprecation messages of the direct dependencies that I have, runtime and dev. I'm done.
So I appreciate that. And hopefully we're capturing everything you said. Reese, I see your hand's still up. Did you have a comment you want to make?
Sorry, no, I just forgot to take it down. Although the next item is one for me.
Sure. And we'll try to cap this to another couple of minutes, like 1 or 2 more minutes, so that we can get to 1 or 2 more. Roy, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I was basically answering to Jordan here. One thing I think me and you, Darcy, we went over last time. I think it is the idea of maybe npm deprecation, this top level command. It just prints by default just for your top level dependencies, and you use --all. I think this is what Darcy was saying, like npm-ls behaves like that since v7. So if you want to see all your dependency trees, you need to use npm-ls --all. So it will behave the same. Like in case you want to see all the deprecation notices for everything, you basically would use that flag --all, and you will see everything. So yeah, and I do like the idea of maybe just checking for deprecation for a package like that. That might be outside of the scope for the initial.
It's an easy minor to add later.
Yeah,
I would love to make my package obsolete by adding that simple feature.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I think, yeah, maybe to what Rice said before, I don't know if it would cause more problem than what is there already today, right? Like with all this warning message being printed directly during the npm install, like you could say there's enormous potentials for reaction from the community too by seeing those alerts there. So
on deprecation, there's just one. It's a little bit too easy also to accidentally deprecate. I think some maintainers don't understand that if they deprecate the latest version, then the npmjs.com shows the whole package as deprecated. So there also can be ones where they didn't intend it to be deprecated.
So basically unintentional, like.
Yeah, like they put out I've seen people, they put out a bad release and then people are telling them your release is bad and they kind of panic and they like deprecate the last release they did. And it actually ends up like then marking the whole package as deprecated. That's just the kind of the way it works, right?
I see. So maybe just
we have a backlog to do to actually warn before doing a deprecation, which you'd be removing all versions from or deprecating all versions. So I think somebody's flagged that to us before for sure, that's a common mistake that happens. There's also I think some policies that we've changed internally about unpublishing because of somebody accidentally publishing the first version, deprecating it or unpublishing it, and then being in sort of like this window of they can't publish a new version type thing. So I just wanted to make one comment before we potentially move on, though. I did put in our notes, and I did want to say that it seems like if we are going to maintain, because I do think we should do this incrementally, because I think it's easier for us to ship in a minor the improvement to consolidate the logs today and show that nice consolidated messaging, and provide actually a flag for no deprecation, similar to no audit, no fund, so that you can actually configure and opt yourself into that completely clean state. And then we can have that discussion about whether or not we want that to be the default, flip that bit for V9, if we want to do that, because I don't think that it would be good to go all the way, and we can't within, I would say, this major release line to remove these warnings, I think, by default. Like,
well,
yeah.
If you're saying we can consolidate them and put them in the other command and change the default output of that command to not include all, if that seems like something that we can do in Semper Minor, which it does to me, because programmatically you can't rely on those things, then I don't actually think there's any point in ever changing the default to hide deprecation, the deprecation summary on install, because at that point it's one line, it's actionable, and it's opt-outable. So like the harmful thing is the flood of messages and the flood of unactionable messages, and the change we've just discussed would address both completely.
Yeah, so I think we have that document that way. So it feels good. Like there's enough information for you to go off and find out more. I think it's good to keep it there. Notably, deprecations can actually be resolvable by end users, consumers, using overrides now, recently shipped, right? Like you can actually, with this information, so to go back to one of the points that you made, Jordan, about this is not your problem. You might be concerned about a package that's deprecated and you want to swap it out for something that is, active, or a forked version of that thing. You can now do that with new functionality.
And that capability is great, but as we were discussing in an earlier item, not every package is a drop-in replacement for every other, and there's lots of subtleties to that. So it is actually it would be harmful to continue to show transitive deprecation warnings, and also more widely communicate that people can use overrides for this, because then they will be more inclined to do something that is unlikely to be correct. Whereas if we hide them by default, then that capability is a wonderfully powerful thing and is great, but it's not a foot gun.
I'll just be mindful that I think there's also an opportunity that consumers become maintainers, potentially. Like they could be using this information to be like, hey, maybe I'll go contribute, that change to get off that deprecated version.
As the recipient of lots of those unwanted pull requests, that's not actually great behavior. Usually, there's usually a reason something is using still using a deprecated package, and that reason is usually not affected by the reason for the deprecation.
I've seen many different reasons why there's deprecated versions.
Right.
Unmaintained.
No, yeah. I'm sure there's all over the place, but an unmaintained package that already works perfectly is fine. There's no reason to change that. And if the maintainer of the package using it isn't concerned about it, then nobody else has the credibility has more credibility than the maintainer for that opinion.
Yeah. I apologize. We're almost basically at time. I know there was one more. Rias, you said there's one that you want to get to.
Yeah, number 4 on the agenda, the reify lifecycle hook.
Awesome. Do you want to, if folks are okay with going about 5 minutes over, can we quickly jump into this? Did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thanks. So there's a few goals here, but the primary goal is to give the ability for people to have some form of external gatekeeping to block an unsafe install. So malicious packages, in our case, is the primary use case. Although I think this would also add a useful option in future for like more mature use, where like enterprises want to be able to have policies to kind of, so-called shift left and just like stop someone installing a package which has been put on a, deny list or something like that. But essentially our goal was to be able to preempt an npm install, an npm update, or any other command where dependencies would be downloaded and scripts could potentially be executed. So that was, and we found that inserting that as a reify hook worked for our purposes perfectly.
So I think this is sort of and I think I gave some internal comms about this. You're at White Source, is that right?
Yeah.
Bruce? Yeah.
Yes.
So I think this is something we have to be, we're pretty careful about, because we're concerned about, one, changes in the API going forward, because we're trying to essentially parse out the context in which lifecycle scripts are being used today. Whether you're the consumer or the one being consumed is sort of the typical two contexts we see. And then when these fire off and what the API looks like that people are using is all consolidated into one place right now, which is not great. Everybody uses scripts and pre and post install scripts, etc. So we're definitely concerned about like adding this, especially, I think, having a safe window in which NPM can essentially operate and build the ideal tree, and then also go and reify without there being any kind of action happening by the packages that are being installed, I think is very important to us, because we need to eventually get to a state where we can confidently tell users that we can do, as we sort of mentioned before, like we can have reproducible builds. And if you have these kinds of potential for, opting into some sort of like hook, then
could we make it we make it simpler by this hook, essentially is like immutable, and that it's not allowed to change the result? Because really all we're after is just the ability to like, pull the ripcord when something is bad. Like, and for example, the motivation for this, like, so we've been detecting and reporting about 100 malicious packages a week, and it sometimes takes up to 3 days from us reporting them for them to be removed from the registry. And like, we just have no way, like, we know they're bad and we can't protect anybody from them until, someone logs in on Monday morning, and like goes through the backlog. So this is our ability to be able to like just instantly block anytime something looks suspicious or confirm malicious to us.
Is the way that the tool works, and I apologize, I don't have the context here, so I'm do you have the ability to, and I'm going to go back to overrides, to create essentially a blacklist, or sorry, like essentially a bad list of packages that you know about, to then be used and keep that up to date to essentially blow up?
Essentially, yes. Although we also let people have control where they could say, don't allow something to be installed that is so new it hasn't even been scanned yet. So it's not necessarily like, a deny list. It's also like a pending list in some cases where, someone was to sort of run like npm update just at a very unlucky time. So yeah, it's essentially like there is in our case, we submit just a set of fingerprints, representing like a hash of all the package versions. And if any of them have a hit or in our, or unknown to us, we, depending on the policy that was set, we can then stop the install from going. So just some more context, like, so like this is something that is possible and implemented in like Yarn 1, Yarn 2, and PNPM. Also, we pioneered it in Bundler. So it's not like complete like science fiction, we're asking for something that's like, can this be done in theory? Like practically speaking, just this concept of before things are downloaded, we, send that kind of list off somewhere external and then block the install if it doesn't like it. It's like in my opinion, a proven concept.
Yeah, and I see Roy's hands up here. What I'll say is, like, I have seen other tools come out like MPQ that essentially wrap install npm to block on and provide some sort of like, extra policies around, the.
Our goal is not to wrap or fork, though. We really would like it that, someone opts in. Obviously, they got to install it, in their project. But when they do, that the other participants in the project don't have to have a custom manager or run a custom script like npm safe install or anything like that. Like, because people just forget.
Yeah. Okay. Roy, go ahead.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Darcy, but I really got the impression here that this can also be just addressed by the tree mutation event proposal that we, I think we have already, the RFC.
I don't think so. I think the tree mutation event that we're talking about, and I think having, looked at that heavily, is like, that's a one-time event at the end of at the end of.
Oh, it's only at the end. It's not different
be
parts of the tree, of the mutation of the tree. I thought that it was going to encompass, before, right before, but you already know what is the actual tree, the virtual one. Then maybe one once you got the ideal tree ready, and then one at the early refi and at the end of refi. That was like multiple points in time of the mutation of the tree.
Right. So the problem there is that we're going to have to read from, potentially you're like building up the tree, you're going to have to have installed, and this is the problem with the post install script or pre-install script. What's a pre-install script? When does it run, right? Because you have to download the thing to actually figure out what you're going to install, and that's why hooks
right now
in
they're
flight,
all there at the end of the refi. So
right
a lot of people have been complaining, like it's not that useful for some cases.
Right. And so this is one of those cases where in flight, I think like they would like to prevent the even pulling in that dependency, like just blow up, like, right, like see.
We just want to pull the escape.
If you do have a lifecycle script that gets triggered right before refi, right, like you already have all the trees together, you can do this kind of logic and see if there is a bad package in it and you want to prevent the install, then you can just throw, and it should just break everything, right? Prevent the code from continuing.
Kind of like a Git. When people are using Git kind of hooks more aggressively now, just to stop a push. If it doesn't meet certain criteria locally, we just want that kind of ability.
Yeah. The problem is like really comes down to, do you have access to write things to disk? Like, do you have access to like networking? Do you have like this is the concern that we have with these hooks and how they've been used historically, how they can be used like to keep us in this cycle of mutation during installation, which is not like the complete opposite of what we're trying to push towards. And I totally understand that Yarn and PNPM have the ability for a very advanced hook system, right? Like I know that there's prior art in this space. Like it's the pushback is really where we want to go in the ecosystem, is to push in kind of like the areas that we were talking about before, with like proper distributions and providing other mechanisms like overrides, etc., to protect you.
So
policies, maybe there's
if it's immutable, then that like maybe solves a lot of your concerns. If it's like really intentionally meant to be a policy thing, like yes, no. I mean, we made it generic to make it simpler, but if instead of a generic hook, it's more of a policy check about the ones, and then you don't have to worry about it mutating anything.
Yeah. So like I want to accommodate your use case. I just think that like adding a hook that like really opens, it really does open the door for other things to happen, especially if like you can write to disk, you can call back home, like what, etc. If it was more so like we came up with a feature that somehow applies the kinds of restrictions that you would like to, and have the npm bail for on your behalf, then that's I feel like the good middle ground here to move forward. So I apologize. I know we're about 10 minutes over. I would love to keep talking about this and keep it open for now, if you're okay with keeping on for another week, and we'll try to give it more time next week.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for accommodating it late today.
Awesome. Apologize if we didn't get to one of your RFCs today, or I know we had a stacked agenda. There's actually going to be probably another RFC coming down the pipeline from our team, which we're pretty excited about for next week. So I'll try to give folks lots of time and lots of warning beforehand. But yeah, thank you for jumping on today. Apologize for the glitch early, but I will see you folks next week, hopefully. Cheers.
Bye.